So I've been following a thread with a friend going back through my life as a 63-year-old man on to see, I acknowledge and see some behaviours and attitudes that go on, and I've taken this thread back to, I can see a day when I was a 5-year-old boy, first day in a primary school classroom, and I've got to a point where I see that some of the things that happened during that period impact on behaviours and relationships and all those things, which were quite formative, not necessarily in a good way, but they resulted in attitudes and behaviours were very much formed during that time. And I can sort of follow that thread all the way through my life and various things that have happened over that time. The question is, I'm not quite sure what to do with it when I get to that. I can see that starting point there, and I can see some of the things that happen quite vividly, actually. I can see the weather on the day. And I'm not sure what to do with that. Yeah, they were things that resulted in behaviours that manifested themselves later on in life, and attitudes that come through relationships, all that stuff, sadness, anger. I'm not sure what to do with it, or if there's anything to do with it.
So if you go very slowly here, you see something happens viscerally, and then as that something happens in the body, what happens in the next moment? Resistance. So resistance is perhaps already part of that closing down, a protection of some kind, a defense of some kind. What happens just consequent to that?
Make a story about it, words.
Perhaps that comes a little later. There's an immediate assessment that may not involve an entire story yet, but has fragments of a story that are relevant or that can be utilized for that immediate response. But there's an immediate response. Where's that immediate response?
I think you're aware of the temperature of your body.
You guys can just answer, just speak at any time, so don't.
So somewhere in the mind you decide if it's good or it's bad. You assess, you do assessment.
There's an immediate perceptual interpretation of the environment, threatening or not threatening.
Hot or cold.
Okay, very straightforward. So something happens in the mind that sees this contraction of some kind. Remember, the contraction already is a form of reaction to what is happening. But that reaction happens so automatically that it's not something that you can initially look at directly. You see it a split second afterwards. And that young mind assesses then in a moment, threatening or not threatening. What happens in the next moment?
Reaction to this. A pull to one?
It's a threat or it's not a threat. If it's a threat, this contraction that happens in the example given, another thing forms. What is that next thing that forms? Okay, so fight, flight, or freeze, perhaps. Maybe we can extrapolate that a little bit further and say some behavior ensues in response to this assessment.
You either lean forward or away, so preference or aversion.
Okay, lean toward or lean away, preference or aversion. Multiple different ways of describing that. Some behavior ensues in response to this contraction, this closing down. What is the behavior, the purpose of the behavior? What is the purpose of the thought, and what is the purpose of the behavior?
Protection, survival.
Protection or survival?
Yeah.
Okay, so it fulfills a function. What is the nature of that thought or behavior? This is a more difficult question to ask clearly.
Self-preservation.
More the quality of it. What's at the heart of it?
You want to bring a truth into it. You want the
There's still a motive, an objective. What is the quality of what you're introducing? That you're all correct. That you're
You're
introducing
freezing
something.
You're freezing it in time.
So you're introducing time. This is really important. This seems to be the part that people keep missing. You're introducing time. You're doing it inadvertently, automatically, reactively. You're introducing time. What is the effect of introducing time? It's recorded. It's wrapped up, the way this video is wrapping up and holding, containing everything that I'm saying. Even every time I swallow and wet my lips, you unfortunately have to look at that in the video at some point. Sorry. It wraps it all up. It says you can access it at any time, but it's on there. Unless I fumble with the transfer or whatever, accidentally delete it, it's on there. Maybe one day it goes onto a site or something, and then it's out there in the world forever. Time. Time comes and wraps up the experience, locks it in place, and has an objective. The objective is to get away from the discomfort, or to soothe, to settle the discomfort as quickly as possible, or to navigate away from these circumstances as quickly as possible, or from this person, this threat. So time, that's the moment that time gets introduced. What happens when time gets introduced? From the moment of complete experience of the expression that is the relationship with life, and why I mentioned the initial reaction is the consequence of the way in which your neurology has developed from the moment of conception to that moment as a 5-year-old. The way in which it has been formed, the networks that have automatically been formed through the way in which your parents were, or their states at the moment of conception, and then their states during the development of the little fetus, their states at the moment of birth, their states from that moment of birth up to 5, all adds to the conditioning that sits in, apparently predominantly, the amygdala in the brain. There's this conditioned state, and the neurology forms in accordance with that. The incident occurs, the feeling is felt, the reaction is there, the secondary reaction is there, that is thought, that is time, that wraps it up, locks it down. Now you start to see, when you begin to observe that same person, try to see this in your mind very clearly. This is the moment that this experience occurs. What occurs? A sensory experience floods through the body. An energy moves through the body that's perceived and recorded, interpreted as a sensation of some kind. This energy activates the biology in a particular way. A sensation is felt. That's in this moment. The energy isn't static, it's totally dynamic. The incident happens, the energy is dynamic, it's felt throughout the body, or in particular areas more than others. Moment to moment, the energy is moving until the moment, and the language is not correct here, time is introduced. Now, we're not in this moment, this present state anymore. We're now in an imagination, which is the interpretation, the reaction. And we're in the consequence of that interpretation and reaction. We're forming psychological time. And we're accumulating that psychological time in an attempt to curb the effect of this sensory disturbance. What happens to the energy? The energy is frozen, it's contained, the way that this recording is contained somewhere on in the memory bank of the phone. Now it's recorded. It's not moving anymore. It's temporarily stabilized. It's been suspended in time. And as long as the attachment to time continues, this can stay suspended. Its nature will be, what was its original nature is the arising, the coming to be, and the ceasing to be, the dissipating, the harmonizing of that movement of energy, the movement of life. So its nature will always tend to express. So as there are moments of interaction with the world, different relationships that form, this energy will tend to try to express all the time. And if it gets the right cue, something that is very similar to its quality, that pocket will rupture, it will open, and it will express again. That same quality of energy will move through the body, be felt very vividly. And because there's already a conditioned behavior or response to this energy, that response will fire again. So yeah, you have a neuronal network. Neurons are brain cells. They're different types of brain cells. They can form connections with one another. Each brain cell can form up to 7,000 connections with other brain cells, and there's approximately 80 to 100 billion neurons in the brain. So there's a lot of connections, So each time a particular connection is established and it fires again because there's the same catalyst for it or a similar catalyst for it in the environment, this network intensifies. It's a chemical network. So each time the chemicals fire, there's an attachment formed to the firing of those chemicals and the sensations that they release or that are associated with them. And so this forms the behavior that then becomes the go-to for any semblance of sensation that is akin to what I experienced as a 5-year-old. And so a habit forms. A personality characteristic forms if it's reinforced enough. I start to see myself as a person who is just anxious around new people. I'm just like that. Who's just agitated with people who don't understand me immediately, or who don't listen to what I'm saying, or who don't pay attention to me, or who don't acknowledge me. It's just in my nature, I just get very agitated with people like that. If you ever break my trust, I've got no time for that. I cut you out instantly. So something develops repeatedly because the same or a similar stimulus is introduced. The same pattern fires. Now, every single time that pattern fires, there's the potential for observation of what's happening. You see, when we start the session, we're simply observing what's happening. The peculiarity of that, the extraordinariness of it, is that all of these accumulations of time, again, why is that important? Because as you sit still, you're the senses are activated initially, and there's more than just the senses, but the senses activated, you're paying attention to what's happening moment to moment. Moment to moment, there's no introduction of time. You're getting prompts, because if there's no prompts initially, the time comes in very quickly. The attachment to content of thought happens very quickly. So I try to give you prompts to take you deeper, deeper, quieter, increasingly still in this state of presence. In the state of presence, presence is the antidote to time. See, the time as the virus. Thought is coming in there constantly, the virus, infiltrating, penetrating, and usurping consciousness, dulling consciousness. Presence is the antidote to time. So as the antidote is introduced, it goes in there and it collects all the time and fragments it, blows it apart, just as your antibodies go and attach to the virus, envelop it, release certain chemicals and destroy it or eliminate it. Harmonize it, this aberrant energy. So see thought as the aberrant state, and there's a harmonizing of that with presence automatically. Not because there's introduction of something. Why not? Because if you introduce something, you're introducing thought again. And we love doing this because certain thoughts that we introduce provide a different kind of solace. So when we introduce a particular thought, I've just realized this is why I'm like this. I don't need any more help. I understand it now. I've got it. It makes sense to me. What have you got? You've got a new story, a new idea, a new concept, a new bit of time. And that time will accumulate like any other time in the body. That thought will form another pattern of reaction. It is already reaction. The very fact that you've just formed that, you've come up with this newfound solace, this newfound comfort, is because there's a reaction to what you're feeling or what you're seeing, what you're perceiving. So this thing continues, and at any moment there's potential to see it for what it is, to see it happening. Most of those moments we're completely ignorant, so we don't see it. We miss it. We know that it's happening because we see the result of it, the effect of it in our life. What was explained earlier was an effect seen in a life consistently over many years. The same effect, the same rupturing and repackaging, the same stimulus, reaction, until one day something arises, a type of activation occurs, an illumination in the mind. You don't do this. Don't be under any illusions that you do this. This is just stupidity, not even arrogance. Something happens, and there's a question. I see this is happening. How is this happening? And from that question, there's an inquiry as to the nature of this experience, the nature of this repetitive cycle. Before that, you have no clue. You just see the cycle. It's just who I am. It's just my personality. It's my characteristic. But you can change. No, I can't. It just sort of happens. This reaction just happens. I only realize it afterwards. There's no awareness. And at a particular point in time, at a particular moment, there's awareness. And at that point, you might say, hold on, this is momentary awareness. I see that this is happening, and I'm conscious of it, but I can't stop it. It's still happening. This part consciousness, just a glimpse, and then it fades again. So, okay, hopefully it doesn't happen next time. Next time it happens exactly the same as before. Sometimes a little bit more consciousness, sometimes a little bit less. From the moment that I start to see there is consciousness to me, and I begin to inquire into that consciousness. Not everybody does this.